Yes, thank you. Thank you. 32nd Miami Book Fair. It's been pretty great, huh? Yeah. I see a lot of faces who have been here starting on Sunday night with Patti Smith and all the way through to now. It's been quite a week so far, and as all of you know, we have quite a week ahead of us as well. I can never stand up here without just sort of extolling the virtues of all of the people who work so hard on putting this on. Leading the pack is everybody here at Miami-Dade College. Let's give Miami-Dade College a huge round of applause. Led by Dr. Eduardo Padron, this is one of the greatest institutions that we have here in South Florida. As you know, it's the largest college in the country. And what it does, and what it does for students and for young people and even not so young people is give them chances to succeed. And I know that the heart and soul of what happens here is that, but the fact that they give this gift of the book fair every year is something that all of us who are readers, all of us who think about ideas should just be so thankful for. And I just want to thank them again, Miami-Dade College. We also couldn't do this without all of the work of remarkable volunteers and staff, and I just want to thank all of them as well. If you're on the staff or a volunteer, please stand or raise your hand so you can be acknowledged. And we also have an amazing advisory board, too, that puts out all kinds of wonderful ideas throughout the year, helps raise money, helps do a lot of things. If you're on the board, please raise your hand or stand. There are a few people. We thank them. And we also thank all of our sponsors, everyone who's helped to make this thing happen. We're doing something a little bit different. You know, we're trying to raise money, even though it's a small amount. If you feel compelled to do so, if you text the word book to 501-501, $10 will disappear from your account, or it'll appear on your next phone bill, but it'll come to us, and it'll help put on the Miami Book Fair. So that's 501-501, and you're texting book to that number, and we thank you if you do that. As I said, our sponsors are so important to help us make this happen. And tonight's sponsor is the Mark Buonaconti Fund. In 1985, a 1985 spinal cord injury left Mark unable to move. Yet each day he moves people to help him find a cure for paralysis. Mark, as you know, is the son of Miami Dolphins Hall of Fame linebacker Nick Buonaconti, and is the inspiration of the Miami Project to Cure Paralysis and the Buonaconti Fund to Cure Paralysis, the Miami Project's fundraising arm. Through Mark's determination and drive, he has inspired researchers and donors to rally behind paralysis research. And now the Miami Project, part of the University of Miami Miller School of Medicine, is the world's most comprehensive spinal cord injury research center. I should say that again. It's the world's most comprehensive spinal cord injury research center. Please welcome to the stage Mark Buonaconti.
Good evening. Thank you, Mitch, for your warm introduction. And as Mitch said, I'm president of the Buonaconti Fund to Cure Paralysis, which is the fundraising arm of the Miami Project to Cure Paralysis, which is a center of excellence at the University of Miami Miller School of Medicine. which funds brain and spinal cord injury research right here in Miami. I can totally empathize with tonight's theme, as I once had a lucky life that was interrupted too quickly while making a tackle in a college football game. But thanks to friends like broadcast legend and devoted Bonacani Fund donor and supporter Tom Brokaw, we are making huge strides in our fight against paralysis. I feel so fortunate to be able to introduce one of my biggest heroes at tonight's Evenings With session. Tom Brokaw served as anchor of the NBC Nightly News from 1982 to 2004. During his career, he covered Watergate, the fall of the Berlin Wall, and 9/11. Brokaw has won every major award in broadcast journalism, including 2 DuPonts, 3 Peabody Awards, and several Emmys, including 1 for Lifetime Achievement. The author of the best-selling book, The Greatest Generation, Brokaw had, by any measure, led a fortunate life until he received the diagnosis that he had contracted a form of blood cancer. In A Lucky Life Interrupted, a memoir of hope, Brokaw takes readers through all the seasons and stages of his illness as he pauses to look back on some of the important moments in his career. Kirkus Reviews calls A Lucky Life wryly good-natured, a wise and oddly comforting look at the toughest news of all. I know that you join me in being so delighted that Tom is now in remission. And it gives me great pleasure to introduce my friend, Tom Brokaw.
Thank you all very much. Thank you. Thank you all very much. I'm very happy to be here. I want to congratulate all of you in Miami who have made this festival a mandatory stop for authors from around the world and on every conceivable subject. Let me tell you as well at the outset how flattered I was to know that Mark was going to be introducing me here tonight. I've known a lot of brave people in my lifetime. Mark is one of the very bravest that I know, and his family, led by his mother Terry and of course by the great Nick Bonacani, would never ever accept defeat when he was so perilously injured. And when I first got involved with the family and the big dinner that they put on in New York, I knew that it would be a calling for me for the rest of my life because I'm a very active outdoorsman. And the first time I ever went to a spinal cord injury ward, I was reluctant to do it until I saw the spirit of these young men and women who were there, and most of them are like Mark. They got hurt riding motorcycles or rock climbing or diving or playing football, but they never lost that inner fire, that inner spirit. So the work that is going on at the Miami Clinic, not too far from here, really is very, very important. And the development by Dr. Barth Green and his entire staff is making advances that no one could have anticipated when they first began. And when you see players get injured now on the playing field, and more of them are all the time, in many instances, the intervention of the Miami Clinic with the steroids that they have developed and the other drugs and the quick freeze application means that it's kept them from being in a condition like Mark is. So I just want to pay tribute to the Bonaconti family and to Dr. Barth Green, the Miami Project, and to all of you for the support that you give it. I'm here tonight, however, to talk about my book. And if there is an oxymoron in American life, it is humble anchorman. We don't really exist, except this has been a humbling experience for me. Everything that I've gone through in the last 2 years at every conceivable level. It was a humbling experience because, as I say in the title of the book, I had a very, very lucky life. I grew up in working class neighborhoods in South Dakota. My dad was a construction foreman. He and my mother were both products of the Great Depression, but they never let that get them down. They always believed in the American dream that their firstborn would go to college someday. They didn't think in the first couple of years that he was in college that he would go off the rails quite as completely as he did, but I did that nonetheless. My mother and father were both a little bewildered by it until one of my best friends in high school, a woman that I met when I moved to Yankton when I was just 15 years of age, and immediately everybody in town told me about this young woman called Meredith Auld, who was the daughter of a doctor, the prettiest girl in 5 states, later Miss South Dakota. She was winning all the awards. Between the two of us in our class, we were the officers of the class. She was a cheerleader, I was a jock. We had the leads in the school play. But we didn't have that high school sweetheart thing going on for 2 very good reasons. She thought I fooled around too much. I thought she didn't fool around enough. So I did go off the rails, and thought I was kind of fooling everybody. If you don't believe me, I have one of my old running mates here in the audience tonight, and he will be witness to that. Until Meredith got on my face one day on the campus with a letter and said, "No one can quite believe what you're up to. I don't want to hear from you again. I don't want you to call or darken my door. You're ruining your hopes of your family, and we don't know what on earth has invaded your thinking. But we're all stunned, and we really don't have much interest in continuing these relationships." It was a turnaround moment. And that was a very lucky time in my life, because I went to work full-time at a television station, commuted to the university, got my grades in order, and then this woman, Meredith, came to me and said, I was out of order. I really went too far. That was not my place to tell you what to do. And I said, no, I had it coming, quite honestly. And we had a cup of coffee, and a year and a half later, we got married. And the 2 most surprised, that was 53 years ago, by the way, that we got married. But the 2 most surprised groups, people always applaud, and then I'm tempted to say, and it's been hell every day for those 53 years. 2 most surprised groups in South Dakota were her friends and my friends. But in ways that we didn't anticipate at the time, we were meant for each other, and we set off on this journey out of South Dakota with everything that we owned in the back seat of the least expensive new car that her father could find on the main street of Yankton, a Chevy 2, and began a journey that brought us to the heights of my profession and the life that we had always could see in the distance, but never thought that we could completely realize. 3 fantastic daughters, lived in Los Angeles, Washington, D.C., New York, traveled the world. It was just one lucky, long ride after another. Our eldest daughter became an emergency room physician. And as an ER physician, she always saw life on the dark side. And so she would say to us from time to time, you know, everything has gone so well in this family's life, If something went wrong, I wonder if we could handle it. It was an appropriate question, but one that I didn't take seriously because I thought this lucky life will just go on. And then one day in August of 2013, at the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, where I was on the board, I'd had a persistent backache. All kinds of orthopedists looked at it and said, well, it's your lifestyle, Tom. It's how you've always lived your life. But it wouldn't go away, and I was falling in a way that I shouldn't have when I was fishing in a boat or in the stream. And my very smart internist, who was not a specialist in the field of cancer, had a suspicion. And he drew some blood one morning, and he called me and said, maybe you should meet me this afternoon in our office. I have another physician who's going to look at some numbers that I've developed, and then we'll talk to you about what we're up to. I really thought I brought a parasite back from Africa. That often happens when I'm traveling in the third world. And I listened to this prominent head of internal medicine at the Mayo Clinic read off these numbers, and it sounded like an SAT test to me. I couldn't figure out what he was talking about. Then he turned to me, and these were his exact words. You have a malignancy. It's called multiple myeloma. You know people who have died from this. Geraldine Ferraro, the first woman to run for vice president of the United States, died from multiple myeloma. You must have known Frank Reynolds, the ABC anchorman. He died from multiple myeloma. And that's what you have. Now, we all wonder how we would react to that news. I'm a journalist. I've been through some hard places and hard times. And I'm always curious about how the human mind reacts to that kind of news. I was astonishingly calm. My first thought was, our family's going to be okay. We just reviewed our financial situation. That's part of our lucky life. I've been well rewarded for what I do. And my next question was, how long do I have? And he said, well, technically, now we think 5 years, but given your otherwise good physical condition and the progress that we're making, we think we can beat that. And then we had a few other exchanges, and I walked out of there in a kind of divided way. I've got cancer. That's not possible. I've had a lucky life. God doesn't come along and give you cancer if you have the kind of life that I've had. That's not a reward. At the same time, I knew the reality of having cancer, but it was still a little bit distant. So I was working on a documentary on the 50th anniversary of the assassination of John F. Kennedy, and we were at a critical time in the process. And I went back to the motel room, and I began to work on my laptop, writing the script, kept another device nearby, and I would Google multiple myeloma. What the hell is this all about? Because they'd given me only the bare bones of it. And I learned that it was a cancer that invades the bone marrow. It develops a protein that can become fatal. And there are all kinds of consequences for it. Then I'd go back to the JFK documentary. And I kept that from everyone at the Mayo Clinic except one friend who was really probably my closest friend, who was suspicious something was up when I didn't show up for a board dinner that night. And he called me and he said, something going on? And I said, come on over and we'll have a martini. And I shared with him, the first person. And I said, but I want to keep this secret. I don't want to show up on the internet as Tom Brokaw, cancer victim. And I haven't told Meredith. She's at the ranch in Montana. I want to tell her face to face. So I spent 2 very difficult days, got on an airplane, flew back across that muscular piece of geography, the upper Midwest and the Rocky Mountains, landed at midnight in a small airport in Livingston, Montana. Meredith was there with our dog, Red. I didn't tip my hand at all because I didn't want to talk to her on the really dangerous 18-mile stretch of gravel road that we had ahead of us. We got back to the ranch house, and I made a stiff drink and sat down and said, there's something I haven't told you. I've been diagnosed with cancer. It's called multiple myeloma. I don't know much about it yet, but it's going to change our lives. Meredith, always the cool and calm one, stared at me, trying to process all of that, asked a few questions, and then we went to bed. And the next morning I woke up and felt better than I had for some time and did a really actively stupid thing. I got in my car with my fishing gear, having just been diagnosed with cancer, and drove 150 miles across Montana to go fishing with friends of mine. Could not have done anything dumber than that, quite honestly. By the second day, I was curled up in a fetal position on a friend's cabin porch in excruciating pain. Barely got back to the ranch. And then 2 days later, I was paralyzed in my bed. I could not move a muscle without electrifying spasms of pain. And Meredith had been dealing with the Mayo Clinic during all that time, and they were throwing ever more lethal painkillers at me, and nothing was working. And she wisely made a decision that we're going to get you medevaced out of here, and loaded me onto a plane to get me to Rochester. And I was in and out of delirium during most of that trip. When we landed, I thought we were back in New York. And it was there in Rochester the next morning when I realized how hard this journey was going to be. Our eldest daughter, Jennifer, who's an ER physician, the same one who said, I wonder if we could handle it, flew in to become what turned out to be my ombudsman and consigliere, my extra physician, and all the teams that we were dealing with at the Mayo Clinic, and doctors, specialists at Dana-Farber and at Sloan all said, we'd put her on our team in a minute because she could do the analysis apart from them, because she was seeing me during the nighttime and during the daytime. Later, when we talked about it, I'd say, what was the value of Jennifer? And my primary oncologist in New York said, well, we'd ask you, what's your pain level on a scale of 1 to 10? And you'd say, 3 or 4, and she'd stand behind you and say, it's a 7. We need to know that, she said. So that was the beginning for me of what turned out to be this book. I'm a journalist, so I was keeping a journal about what I was going through every day. I had a lot of time, downtime, at home in New York. And then I thought, there are things that other cancer patients can learn from my experience, because I am of the strong persuasion that almost every patient goes into a doctor's office, however well educated they are, and treats it like it's the Mayan temple. And they don't speak the language, they don't understand the culture, and most of what the doctor is saying to them is flying by them because they're in such anxiety about the condition that they may have. I see a lot of heads out there nodding, so I know I've touched the right nerve here. And I thought, maybe I can write a book that will be helpful to families and physicians and healthcare institutions at the same time. And I'm grateful to say that that has been the end effect of this book. Any number of physicians are saying to me, I'm buying it for all of our senior residents, or I'm buying it for the people in our patient relations department so they'll know how to deal with folks. And I'm talking to the Mayo Clinic and other institutions about how we can help cancer victims especially, because it is such a daunting diagnosis. Your body has been betraying you. Cancer cells are determined to bring your life to an end. And everything that the best medicine can throw at them, they'll rearrange their cell structure to defeat that and keep attacking you. And that's the reality. When you get flu, you know you're going to be over it probably in 2 weeks. Or if you get a broken leg, 6 weeks in a cast and on crutches. With cancer, there's no guarantee of an end game. It's best guess. And the best guess these days is astonishing because of the progress that is being made. So I went through all of these different levels of anxiety and assurance and uncertainty. And my body, which had served me so well for so long, I could always rely on it. Just that year alone, I had been bicycling across Chile and Argentina, parts of Peru. Meredith and I had been in Africa, covering the closing days of Nelson Mandela, and then visiting a friend of ours in Tanzania, and I'd gone bird hunting with him, I'd been fishing, and all of that came to a screeching halt, and I didn't know whether it would return. I never believed I was going to die from it. Everybody that I was dealing with would say to me, it looks good for the long haul. Your chromosomes are in the right construct. Genetic condition means that we can keep throwing these drugs at you, and you probably are going to avoid a stem cell transplant. But of course, there are no guarantees. I was encouraged by the progress that I was making along the way, but I was unaccustomed to the condition I found myself in. So in November in New York, when we had a nasty winter in 2013, I would use a walker in the house or a cane to get around. And I was working on the JFK documentary, not telling my team what I was going through, except I had a bad back. So they would come out to the house, we'd work on my laptop and putting the program together. I did tell my two principal bosses, and that was it. But every day I was determined to get out of the house and walk a half a block to a coffee shop just to prove to myself I still had mobility and get a bagel and a cup of coffee. It was sleeting and snowing. It was really god-awful. And halfway to the coffee shop, there's a bus stop on 79th Street in New York. And it had this life-size poster of Tom Brady in all of his Tom Brady-ness, advertising Ugg boots. And he was staring moodily down 79th Street in the photograph. And all the little old ladies who were waiting for the bus were kind of mooning over this photograph of Tom Brady. And every day as I got astride of that great photograph of this handsome Hulk, this American icon, I'd stop and I'd look up and I'd drop the F-bomb on him. And I'm here to tell you that helped me as much as any therapy that the doctors prescribed for me. I did know that I was making steady progress because the numbers were demonstrating that. But there were uncertainties along the way. I had a terrible fall at Christmas time, opened up an enormous gash on my forehead in our house in Westchester. Got that stitched up. Then just when I thought I was feeling well, I came down with a severe bronchial infection and had to be put in urgent care at Sloan Kettering, pumping me through kinds of fluids because infection is a great danger for cancer patients, obviously. And then I got to know the American hospital system from the ground up. We have 8 doctors in our family, by the way. And I have done 3 documentaries on healthcare in America. But there's nothing quite like being a patient and being in a big healthcare system and seeing it from the inside out. And what everyone learns when they do that is that the goddesses in American life, the real angels, are the nurses and the orderlies. Those are the people who cheer you up and do the hard work. And in New York, at a time when we're having a big discussion in this country about immigration, almost everyone I met at Sloan Kettering was an immigrant. They were all legal, but they came here from everywhere. They came from the Caribbean, they came from the Far East, they came from Russia. As I was about to go under getting repair work done on my spine, I heard this woman who was going to be presiding, and I said, "Are you Russian?" And she said, "Yes. I went to medical school in Russia. It wasn't good enough for here, so I came back here and got a PhD and then got another medical degree. And with that, I went under." And I thought I was in pretty good hands. But all of that was instructive to me because I realized that there are 2 universes. The universe of the well and the universe of the afflicted. And the universe of the afflicted are dependent on these fantastic healthcare systems that we have in America. But they're not perfect. And they need the best efforts of all of us. We're going through that debate again now about how we deliver healthcare in America and do it in a way that is fair and efficient for everyone. And it's a struggle because times are changing. And we have by no means reached the end of this long tunnel. But the work that is done on a daily basis in the laboratories, in the hallways, the urgent care centers, is remarkable indeed. When I first got to Sloan, a lot of the senior staff came in because I knew members of the Board of Trustees, and we have a really close friend who was a classmate of my daughter who's one of their exalted surgeons there, and they senior people would come in and say, Tom, you're going to be back on your feet 9 months or 10 months. That wasn't true. And I don't believe that they should be saying that to people. I think you have to treat people as mature, thinking, responsible citizens who want to take control of their lives and are prepared for the tough news as well as for the false assurances that things are going to get well, because when they don't right away, or they don't go the way that you expect them to, then there's a big emotional setback. Cancer treatment is not math. 2 + 2 does not equal 4 in math, in cancer treatment. It really is best guess and the best laboratory work and how it's turned out. And then the patient is at the center of that, and they should be included by the clinicians in everything that they're doing and why they're doing it. Because then you're taking charge and you're feeling more engaged by your own treatment and by your own condition. Well, I did get lucky because the drugs that they threw at me were working very well. And so by March of the following year, I was then in a weekend getaway where I still couldn't swim the way that I wanted to. We were down at Virgin Gorda, and the word got out back in New York that I had multiple myeloma. And we put out a statement, and in fact, it was true. And then I asked everyone to be considerate of my condition and my family, that we wanted to concentrate on me getting well and not have to answer a lot of questions about it. And for one of the few times in my business, all the social media, all the gossip sites, all the other places respected what I had to say, which stunned me, quite honestly. They left me alone just to deal on getting well. And at that point, my journal had become what became this book, A Lucky Life Interrupted. And the recurring theme in the book is how to take control of your life if you're a cancer patient. And if cancer enters your family, everybody in that family gets cancer to one degree or another. If you have a friend who has cancer, but you've not had it yourself and it's not in your family, you can be sympathetic. You cannot be empathetic until it enters your family. You can't fully understand the viciousness of this disease. It assaults everything that we take for granted, that our body is our friend and it will serve us well. And cancer, and the words of the greatest cancer physicians and scientists and researchers that we have, is the most immutable enemy that cancer faces. It spends its every waking moment trying to defeat what medicine is throwing at it. But the good news is now that in cancer research, we're on the cusp of the golden age of immunotherapy, of re-engineering our own bodies to attack cancer. And we're going to see some remarkable changes going on. We now lose 1,600 people a day to cancer. And it's something we have a hard time acknowledging. Multiple myeloma is 20th on the list. It's a small population cancer. Although, as Meredith and I have often said, everybody we know who has cancer has multiple myeloma. And my doctors explain, well, it's because you're high profile, Tom, and they want to talk to you about their cancer, and they do wherever I go. I was on the Today Show one morning out on the plaza, and there was a guy holding up a big sign that said, Tom, I have multiple myeloma. Do you want to talk about it? I said, yeah, absolutely, I do. Wherever I go, that happens. And of course, we're of a certain age, so our friends who have cancer and get multiple myeloma are generally in that demographic group as well. The great lesson of this book and this experience for me is that I'm still a lucky guy. Not only did I get my cancer arrested, I'm in remission. There are no guarantees. We hope that it'll stay. At this moment, I'm on chemotherapy. I take a pill every day, and it's a maintenance pill so that I can continue the life that I've had. I've had some physical damage in my back that I'm constantly working on restructuring. I haven't learned the lessons of not getting on airplanes and flying to places every day of every week, but I'm working harder at that. But most of all, what I've come to realize is I'm still a lucky guy. Beginning with my family, who were indispensable in getting me through all of this. Jennifer, the doctor, who was taking notes and doing separate research and giving me tough talks. Meredith, who was my pharmacologist and tough cop. The wise one in the family who organized the pill box within 20 minutes, it seemed, about what I was taking and when I should be taking it, and was there during the difficult times. I was so paralyzed with pain, a couple of months in the middle of the night, I couldn't move out of bed. And I'd have to relieve myself, so I'd have to wake her up. I'd be there on my back. Say, Meredith, she'd get up uncomplainingly, go get one of those god-awful plastic bottles that the hospitals hand out to you with a crooked neck, and come in. For 53 years of marriage, she would help me relieve myself. But it was all done in such a slow-mo way, so I wouldn't make an urgent move and get in more pain, that we decided to call it Tai Chi P. We don't think it's a phrase the medical community has picked up on yet, but we're working on it. The bottom line is that it has been a life-altering experience for me, because it made me aware that all of us, to one degree or another, are going to have our dearest hopes and dreams interrupted, challenged, that there are times when, despite all the planning that you may make in your life, when fate will intervene and you have to deal with it. And when you do, it's best not to do it in a solitary way or as a solo practitioner. It's best to do it with the people that you love and care about. They help you get through it, all the way down to our grandchildren as well. And that makes you more fully appreciate how blessed we are to have the lives that we have in this country, the access to the medical care that we do, the information that is available to us. We have, like all grandparents, we're quite wild about our granddaughters. We have two in New York who are girls who live on the Upper West Side. They're typical New York West Siders. They have an enormous appetite for life, for the various cuisines of New York, and for just charging through their day. And they came into the house one time and they were making a lot of noise at a very high volume. And I was trying to explain to them in a way that they wouldn't be offended the real meaning of decibels. I said, you know, girls, you ought to know about decibels. That's how we measure volume, about how loud things are. And they nodded very sagely. Oh, well, that went right by them. Until the next week, they came in, and I was in my little office, and one of them came up to me very solemnly. They call me Tom because they saw me on television first, by the way. They don't call me Grandpa, it's Tom, which always gets people in restaurants turn around and these little tots are saying, Tom, here's what I want to order here tonight. The eldest of the two came to me and said very solemnly, Tom, we're going to keep the decibels down today. So I thought I'd made some kind of progress with that. So I'm here talking about a lucky life interrupted, but not just about my life, but what I hope will be useful to other families and patients, and how to deal with what could be potentially a mortal disease, about the lessons that go well beyond the research that is done in laboratories or the diagnosis that doctors make, about the larger lessons of cherishing the time that we all have and the relationships that we have with one another. So at the end of the day, and at the end of a certain stage in your life, you can say, I went through the knothole, with the hope of a lot of people, but I emerged on the other side, despite the damage that was done to my body and the extraordinary difficult circumstances that had to be shared by my family, really a better person, because it made me much more conscious, much more cognizant of what other families go through. I don't walk down a street in New York and not see somebody in a wheelchair at an elderly age, or somebody missing a leg, or go to a veterans hospital and see these young men and women who are coming back from battle zones so badly damaged, or see my friend Mark, who's been so brave all this time, and say to myself, Tom, you still got a lucky life. Thank you all very much, and I'd be happy to take any more questions. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all very much.
Well, let me be the first to say it's hard to believe after watching you on the news for 20-some years that I'm actually face-to-face with the real Tom Brokaw. My heart's pounding a little bit, and I really appreciate it. You're in a very unique position. I happen to be a urologic oncologist, so I can relate from the other side.
Can you lean down to that microphone a little more?
Yes. You want to start with
that's better,
how
yeah.
appreciative I am that actually talking to you? No, you're in a unique position. I'm a urologic oncologist, so I deal with, from the other side, what you're talking about. And first of all, I'm going to start recommending your book to all my patients. I think it'll be extremely valuable.
Thank you.
You're in a unique position because you understand our political system, and now you've been through the medical scenario as a patient. My own personal perspective, and I think widely thought of, is that we need access to everybody equally. You're Tom Brokaw, you got to the Mayo Clinic, you got there relatively quickly, you have the greatest of care, Memorial, et cetera. Everybody obviously cannot achieve that. What are your thoughts? My own is that we should have a national health service with excellence for everybody. It works in the UK, it works in France, Germany. But I don't see any light, particularly with the Republican administration or any administration now. Please give us your thoughts, and if you believe that's reasonable, how we can get there. Thank you, sir.
It's a question that I think is on the minds of everyone, and with good reason. I developed a mythical character, and I don't think it's mythical, by the way, during the course of my illness. I realized how lucky I was. First of all, I went to work for NBC 50 years ago when RCA owned the company. And we had really golden health and welfare benefits in those days. And it turns out, as RCA was sold to GE first and then to Comcast, I was a legacy employee. And so all of my gold-plated health and welfare benefits got passed along. And I'm telling you, I ran the meter really high during the course of my treatment. Just the pills alone. I'll also tell you something else. One of the insurance companies, it was a carrier for GE, called and said, we don't see Tom Brokaw on television much anymore. Do you want to keep him on your rolls? Can't we just take him off? That's what goes on with insurance companies. They had a big stamp on my file that said, do not tamper. Here's what I believe. It's a political conundrum. Here's where we are right now. We're in the midst of affordable care, which is imperfect. It's working well for the people at the bottom who didn't have coverage before, but now do. But the impact on the healthcare system in America at the moment is that people who had their own coverage now find their rates going up and their deductibles are higher. Therefore, they're not going to the hospital as often as they did before, and their health is not being maintained. So when they do go to the hospital, they're in worse shape. Those who do have coverage for the first time are going to the hospital a lot, understandably. But they haven't been to the hospital in a number of years because they didn't have coverage. So they're in tough shape when they get there. And one of the many impacts of all this is that in communities across the country that can't support a big healthcare system. In our hometown, Meredith and I grew up in Yankton. Her father was a doctor. There's a first-rate hospital system there. I doubt if it'll survive because community hospitals can't afford to keep up with the enormous cost pressure that is now going on. And therefore, I've been talking to the Mayo Clinic people, and it's the best system I think you can possibly imagine. We have now 19 affiliated partners at different places that meet our standards, and we're helping them out. But we may even have to have mobile treatment of some kind, where there are going to be Mayo Clinic buses or vans or other kinds of things that go out to the smaller communities with a full complement of doctors and help them through what they're doing. I always thought that Affordable Care, the Obama plan, tried to do too much at once. That they should have concentrated primarily on those who didn't have insurance, and then over a phased period of time, work it out so others could get involved. If you ask a lot of physicians, they want a single payer system. They really want to do that because it's easier than dealing with the insurance companies. But that is politically impossible in the current circumstances. That is not going to happen. And one of my arguments, and I'm an umpire here, I call balls and strikes. I'm not on one team or the other. One of my arguments with the Republicans is, you don't like Affordable Care, you don't like Obamacare, where's your plan? You spend all the time saying you want to take it down. You can't just take it down and not have anything right behind it. What is your plan? And they all say, well, you know, we're going to do something about medical malpractice. That's 2% or 3% maybe of the cost of health care in America. There has been no really overarching plan that has come from the other party, as imperfect as Obamacare is and Affordable Care is. So if they start again, if they win the White House and they can keep control of Congress, how long will it be before we have a new health care plan? And frankly, the country can't afford to wait that long. This is a desperate need for the two parties to come together and say, we've got to work this out. And we've got to be rational about it and not just use it as a doormat to advance a particular candidate's ambitions to be president of the United States or to be a leader of Congress. That's how I feel about what's going on in healthcare in America, and it's going to be a top priority for whoever controls the White House and the Congress in the next cycle.
Mr. Brokaw, you won't remember me, but 30 years ago at Southern Methodist University, you gave a lecture. And after that lecture, there was a faculty reception with trustees. It was closed to graduate students.
Yeah, I'm having a hard time hearing.
I managed to sneak into that reception and get a free meal. And I was trying to be unobtrusive as possible. And you walked across the room and talked to me for 10 minutes in front of the Dallas elite about environmental science. I'm a professor here of environmental science, and I was that graduate student. So and I wanted always to thank you for that moment.
Listen, one of the reasons I love, thank you. One of the reasons I love being a journalist is that I was always kind of the gregarious kid who was going around in the small towns in which I lived trying to find out what was happening. And I had a mother who worked at the post office, and she was the managing editor of the town in which we lived. She heard everything, because everything came through the post office in these small towns. She wanted to be a journalist, but college cost $100 a year when she graduated from high school at the age of 16, couldn't possibly become one. But she became my mentor in many ways. Come home at night and tell me these stories. And I was always going around, and my old friends still remember me, you know, kind of turning over the rocks and saying, what's going on here, and wanting to share it with it. And when you're a journalist, it's a perfect excuse, really, to find out what's on people's minds, to find out what is going on here. One of my dear friends is sitting in the front row, Joanne from Joe Stonecrabs. We met when Richard Nixon would come down to Florida and hang out over in Key Biscayne. And one of the best things that ever happened to me is I got to know Joanne and her whole family, and I can get a table at Joe Stonecrab when I want to.
Good evening, Mr. Brokaw, and thank you so much for being here. I almost didn't stay, but then the power of friends made me stay, and it's very fortuitous because I, too, am a cancer survivor. Before the age of 35, I had 2 breast cancers, 1 in each breast, and prior to that, 15 years ago, I had a kidney transplant. Your talk in the book about the anxiety is something that I think people need to know about, because I get up every day and I try to be civil. But there's always that back of your head when you get up, and what is today about? And my feet are swelling. Well, is it because I'm getting old, or is it because my kidney's starting to give way? And I think it's important for doctors to realize that. And I'm always writing these letters to my doctors. I am treated at Sylvester Cancer Center and UM Jackson for my transplant. And it really was a big deal to get medicine, to the point where I say, I'm not asking for heroin. Like, I need you to write a prescription for my anti-rejection medicine today. And it's such, people don't understand the way you have to fight. And if you don't fight, I always wonder about the people that don't fight. There was a moment where my COBRA was, someone did something with our bank account, my COBRA stopped, and one of my medications, 30 days of my anti-rejection medicine, is $1,500 without insurance. I had to find $1,500 every day, every month for 6 months. When I went to transplant to see if I qualified for anything, the woman just sort of threw up her hands and she went, oh, well, you're probably going to stop taking your medicine. And I went, what? Because I couldn't believe that there were people that just gave up. So I am so grateful for someone in your position, and I mean that with someone that has the financial means, that also went through some things and got to see that.
Well, I want to thank you for bringing that, because that's what we all need to be concentrating on. I started to say a few moments ago, I had this mythical character when I was ill. I had that great coverage. But I often thought about somebody who grew up outside of Wichita, Kansas, now 45 years old, went to a community college, not one as good as Dade, obviously, but developed a gas station, maybe two, and then had a couple of convenience stores, living the American dream, making maybe $300,000 a year, gets hit with multiple myeloma, age 45, does not have Part D of Medicare or Medicare at all, has a very modest health care plan, and not access to world-class institutions in some of those smaller communities. Mm-hmm. What do? And that's the obligation that I think that the country has. When it comes to the price of pharmaceuticals, it's out of control, in my judgment. There are too many drugs that cost way too much money. And I have warned the pharmaceutical industry, if you don't do something about it, the government will, and you won't be happy. So you better figure out what it is that you want to do about the high cost of these drugs. Now, they always make the same claim. Well, the one drug that we get the most money for underwrites all the other experiments that we have to do. I said, then figure out something industry-wide, where you develop a pool of resources for people who can't afford what you're charging them for these drugs, and get everybody into the pool, and then having a kind of gateway about who deserves to get it, and let the hospitals help run that. But the cost of drugs has just gone completely off the charts, and it's unfair, because we don't want healthcare in America to be a system that divides and conquers different groups based only on their ability to pay. You can't have that, quite honestly. Thank you.
Hi, I went through breast cancer from December 7th, 2008 to December 17th, 2009. And I didn't really have it so bad after listening to the last questioner. But anyway, I went through 8 chemo and 30 radiation treatments, and I had a mastectomy on the right side. And later on, I had reconstruction. But when I started to feel queasy and, I had stomach problems, I went to my acupuncturist, and she gave me, I'll get to it, don't worry. She gave me Chinese herbs. She prescribed them. And they really helped a lot. I never had the problem of queasiness again while taking the chemo. Anyway, I was wondering if you had heard about doing that, because I think more people should know about it so they wouldn't have to suffer.
Well, there's an enormous amount. The other thing is that I really recommend to people that you've got to develop a filtration system, but you can find an enormous amount of information about every illness and every condition now online. And you have to be careful that you just don't go completely off the edge of the kind of wacko treatments. But Mayo Clinic, Johns Hopkins, Cleveland Clinic, Dana-Farber, University of Miami, they all have terrific sites dealing with all the illnesses that we are talking about here tonight and others that exist. And so you can find there the kind of answers to questions you need and reach out to other people.
And I have another question. I think that pharmaceutical companies shouldn't be allowed to advertise in the mainstream media because they spend so much money on that. I think they should spend it on fighting the side effects of all the illness, of all the medications. What do you think?
Well, I can't answer all the questions, but I think just having those expressed here is very helpful because it does enlist other people in the cause of what we're going to have to do. So thank you for that. We'll take the 3 that are left there, and then we'll have to wrap it up if we can. Okay?
Mr. Brokaw, I would like to say that this is the best day of my life. I grew up with you, and I love you so much. And I was like, I'm gonna ask him. He's been to Africa, he's been everywhere and everything. I wonder, have you been to my hometown, Willacoochee, Georgia? And I said, I don't know, maybe he's come through or something. But I wanted to know, had you ever been to Willacoochee? And if not, you've got a welcome. And I love you, and thank you for coming to our college. I am a microbiology professor here at Miami-Dade College. And I always tell my students, if I ever wanted to meet anybody, it was Louis Pasteur, Martin Luther King Jr., and Tom Brokaw. Yes!
Thank you very much. I've been all over Georgia. Don't think I've been to your hometown, but I've been all over. From Raven Gap to Tidy Light, as they say in Georgia. So,
Come on by, we'll leave
yeah. All right, thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Brokaw, thank you again for coming. Like the speaker before me, I grew up watching you. You were the reason I even wanted to major in journalism when I was a little girl. I think I started watching when I was 8. I'm not going to give my age. That's not going to happen. I just wanted to come up here and say thank you for making, influencing me to become a journalist. Well, and unfortunately, I don't practice anymore. I teach, but it's a form of journalism. You have to get a story out of a student every so often. But I just wanted to say thank you very much. And this actually is one of my bucket list things. I never thought I was going to get to meet you. So
Thank you.
Thank you.
Actually, it's a privilege to have the job that I have, in part because, I've been there through very difficult times. 9/11 was the single most difficult time I ever went through. The fall of the Soviet Union, the rise of China, Watergate, all the great catastrophes with the space program, and now what we're going through in Paris and the consequences of that for our country and for the Western world, we're going to have to pay attention. And we have a presidential election underway. I haven't lost my appetite for covering these great events because they really define who we are at any given time in our history, and we have to take them seriously. So I hope that everyone in this room, whatever your political beliefs or whatever your biases may happen to be, that you'll step forward in this election year because, frankly, the issues are unparalleled in the 21st century. We've never had a war between the Western culture and jihadists, radical Islamicists. in a degree that we are now. And it's a long way from over, so we have to pay attention. Yes, ma'am, last question. Oh, she's our moderator. Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thanks very much. Thanks.
Thank you all for coming. Mr. Brokaw will be signing books over here, so if you can line up kind of against the wall, we would appreciate it. Thank you very, very much.